Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Attleboro School Committee meeting of Monday. Welcome to the Attleboro School Committee meeting of Monday, April 11th, 2022. So you're notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. I'm going to start tonight with the public hearing regarding school choice. Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 76, Section 12B, Subsection D, the Attleboro School Committee is convening a public hearing on the matter of school choice for the 22-2023 school year. Is there anyone who would like to come forward and speak on the matter of school choice? All right, I don't see anyone here. As is our custom, we'll keep the public hearing open for a few minutes. We'll keep it open until 6:35. If no one arrives, we'll close the public hearing.
Where's the O'Connell softball field? Is that the one here?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm trying to, like, the one in Lee's Pond is that one. It's not that. Oh, that's what we named it.
Oh, so I guess it must be, because if it's gonna rain, it's at bright. So.
Yeah. It's just.
All right.
Just got it. All right, 6:35. Seeing no one here, I'll close the public hearing on school choice for the 2022-2023 school year and proceed with the rest of our business agenda tonight. And we will start with our Student Advisory Council update. Thank you. Glad you guys got the late memo that we're starting early tonight, so well done.
Thank you. Good evening. This week's All Around Attleboro segment contains important information regarding the end of April.
For our SIC shoutouts, AHS senior Emma Boss was named as one of the top CTE students in the state by the Massachusetts Association of Vocational Administrators. She will be honored Thursday night in Worcester. For district-wide events, there will be no school on April 15th for Good Friday, as well as April 18th for Patriots' Day. And finally, there will be no school on April 19th to the 22nd for April break. For the elementary schools, Hill Roberts is having their Read Across Hill Roberts event, which will run the week of April 11th. They will be welcoming guest readers into classrooms throughout that week. Hill Roberts' PTO meeting will be held on April 12th at 6:30 p.m. Studley's having their PTO meeting on April 13th at 6:30 p.m., and Willett's PTO meeting will be on April 14th at 6 p.m. Willett will also be having their spring fling on April 14th at 6 p.m. For the middle schools, Brennan's PTO meeting will be held on April 12th at 7 p.m. Parents and guardians are all welcome to attend these meetings and get more involved in their students' community.
For the high school, come and celebrate your student at the Combined National Honor Society's induction ceremonies on April 13th at 6:30 p.m. in the Bray Auditorium. And then lastly, for community engagement, commemorative t-shirts are available for purchase for the Lights Out event at the Lights Out website. Tickets for the June 18th Lights Out extravaganza are available on the website as well. This information is also available on the Attleboro High School's Facebook page. This concludes our segment of All Around Attleboro. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Any questions or comments, Mr. Geddes? Do you have a? No, you looked intent, okay. We'll move on to our superintendent's report. Mr. Sawyer?
Thank you, Chairman. I have two brief updates before we begin tonight's major business to discuss the budget. First, just wanted to give you a brief update on COVID. As you saw, we had an uptick in our cases, both as a community and a school district last week, still within the normal range that we're beginning to settle into as, what normal looks like under these conditions. But we do continue to keep an eye on the BA2 subvariant, find the research coming out of the scientific community interesting that BA2 is now the dominant variant in America, and yet we're not seeing the same surge in cases that Europe is seeing. They're not quite sure what that's even about. So a lot of uncertainty around how things might unfold as a result of all that, but the good news is that as we sit here today, even though we continue to see the numbers go up and down, which I think will be the norm for the time being, we're not seeing clusters of cases in our schools, and that just reinforces the idea that schools remain safe. We did hear from the state that the April 22nd deadline for testing they have extended, so they're going to continue to pay for testing into the spring, and they're promising us more information on what we can expect for the remainder of the spring and then into the summer and fall for testing as well. I would just say that as long as the state is paying for it, I think as a district, we should continue to do it. It provides us excellent information to help us to know what's really true about what's going on in our schools and to help us to do the best job we can to keep everybody safe. Another point I would just make is that as we head into a break, it almost doesn't matter what the data looks like this week, because there'll be a whole week in which we're not all together. That might be good in that there's less opportunity for spread, but it might be bad depending on who we all choose to spend our time with over the week. So I just would remind everybody that for people who are receiving the at-home tests as part of our testing program, it's very helpful for people to remember to take that test on Sunday before you return, so that we catch as many cases before people return to school. Hopefully that number will be very, very low, but I'd rather know what the truth is than to find out the hard way through routine testing during that week that being away next week caused an incident. Unless there are any questions about that topic. Just wanted to give you a quick update on administrator vacancies. Very hopeful to have an announcement about the high school later this week. It was our goal to get this done before break, and I remain optimistic that will be the case. And the assistant principal searches continue. Those processes continue both at Hyman Fine and Hill Roberts. We also posted for the assistant principal position at Attleboro High School, and the associate principal remains an open position that we have already previously posted. So those are two vacancies that if we get a principal in place, we will focus immediately on, and hopefully we can get to June with all of our positions filled and know exactly where we stand for July 1. So it's been, obviously, as you know, quite a bit of movement there, and we will at some point plan to bring everybody in so that we can review all those moves and you can get to meet some of the people that you haven't had a chance to see in person. All right, so tonight the administration is here to present our proposed budget for FY23. As you know, in March, I toured our elementary schools to present some information about the district to families. As I explained at the start of that presentation each time, I'm completing my 6th year as superintendent. And in the 6 years that I've been doing the job, I am beginning to see some things much more clearly. And, I joke that the job did not come with a manual. A lot of it have had to figure out on my own. But give anyone 6 years and hopefully they'll figure out a thing or two. And one of those is that I need to do a better job messaging about our funding problem here in Attleboro. It's my responsibility. And I'll be honest with you, I think part of the struggle here is my desire to balance our concerns when it comes to funding. I don't wish to unnecessarily cause a panic or to damage people's image of what's going on in our schools, because I'm very proud of what we do, and I think that we offer an excellent education at a very good value. The problem is that by skirting this issue and desiring not to make too big of an issue, we hide what is increasingly becoming an unsustainable crisis. And I need to be sure that in an effort to, sidestep creating any sort of tension around this issue, that I don't leave whoever succeeds me with a, huge problem that everyone acts like nobody knew what was going on, right? And so I think it's a problem that I haven't done a better job of making it clear how bad the situation is, and those presentations were an opportunity to have some conversations about that. But I feel like I need to start tonight's presentation by just summarizing some of the things that I've been saying out and on that tour. Our funding problem here in Attleboro is structural, and we've talked about that many times before. That shouldn't be a surprise to you. And by that, I mean, this is not due to budgetary decisions, right? The city does not have the capacity to address this issue. So there is nothing in this budget year, in this budget presentation, that can be done to address the real problem here. The problem is not caused by a lack of support from the city. That is not what's at the heart of it. And many of our budget battles as a city and a school department in the past devolved into that. And I think that that's part of why I've always been hesitant to be more straightforward about the truth about all of this, because I do not want to lead us towards another one of those fights unnecessarily, because truly we enjoy support from the city, and the city does what I think it can. Now, in any given year, there's always, a certain amount of money up for grabs, and, one could always argue for more or less. But, the city does more than it is required of it, and considering its total resources available, I think that we enjoy a good deal of support and appreciate the work that has been done. And I want to be very clear that those commitments protect us in years in which state funding is a problem for us. If we didn't have that city support, those years would have been catastrophic for us. So, the relationship we have with the city is very important. And again, from my perspective, it's not a budgetary problem. The truth of the matter is that we are significantly underfunded from the formula itself. 6 years ago, we, for the first time, really estimated what we need as a district. And when I say what we need, I'm not talking about a wish list of things that would be really, really nice to have. I'm here to tell you that list would far exceed what we have presented to you with this budget packet and previous ones. When we talk about what we need, it's an honest assessment of what resources we need to do the job that's being asked of us by, state and federal regulations, by the pressures of accountability in the state, and also by what we hear families in the community saying that they expect from us out of their child's education. And so when we put all of it together, we come up with an estimate of roughly $10 million. That's a staggering number, and to some people it seems unrealistic. But the fact of the matter is that this is a fraction of the difference between what we get as a district and what an average district would get or is enjoying across the Commonwealth. The fact of the matter is that in this fiscal, in FY21, the gap between Attleboro and an average funded district has grown to almost $24 million. And we come up with that figure of $24 million by looking at the gap between what we spend per pupil on our students and what the average community in Massachusetts spends on their students. And we've been looking at this calculation again from the beginning. When we did the 10 million figure, that gap was closer to $12 million, and it has grown in the last 5 years by 12 million, almost doubled it in total. And the basic reason for that is that the state's funding, which we track very closely to, has grown by just under 3% a year, about 2.8% a year. It's gone up in the last 5 years. But the per pupil expenditure, average per pupil expenditure in the Commonwealth goes up by closer to 5% a year. And so what's happening is that many communities, enough communities in the Commonwealth, recognize that the state's funding is inadequate to accomplish what people expect of their educational system, and they contribute extra funds to make up the difference. And as I've already said, Attleboro as a community does not have that capacity, and so we fall behind. And as this goes on year in and year out, we fall farther and farther behind. And again, what was a staggering problem 5 years ago has almost doubled since. Even though our estimate really hasn't changed all that much at all. So we just are falling farther and farther behind, and that's a reality, right? That's just a factual statement. And, we take pride as a district that we, as a result of these conditions, we really stretch our dollars and provide great value for our community. But the fact of the matter is that as these gaps grow farther and farther apart, it's an unsustainable reality that we would be able to continue to compete with the people. Because the fact of the matter is that our children here in Attleboro are held to the same standard by the state as children in every other community. And we are being asked to make sure that they get the same education as the students in our neighboring communities. And the fact of the matter is that becomes harder and harder as those students in other communities have access to resources that we cannot provide, because as a community, we are not funding our schools at the same level. This is an inequity that is a real problem for our students, for our staff, who are the people who ultimately have to make up the difference, but as a community as a whole. And so whether this is a fair situation or who's to blame or how to fix it, these are discussions for another day. None of it matters, because in this particular year, the picture is such as it is. And so we're going to talk about a budget that's based on what's available to us and how we're going to make that work to the best of our best of our ability, as we do year in and year out. And we're going to deliver an excellent educational system for next year. But I just think it's important that people understand that the budget discussion and the fact that we are underfunded in many ways are two separate issues. And one doesn't necessarily mean that the other one isn't true. So with that context, I'll ask Mr. Furtado to come join the table, and we'll walk you through this year's budget proposal.
So tonight, Mr. Furtado and I will present an overview of the FY23 budget. What you'll hear from us tonight are the goals of the presentation, the state's budget proposal, the district's proposal, our educational priorities and how we make decisions upon the funding that we have available to us, and then at the end we'll conclude with questions and any comments that you have. So through this process, what are we striving to accomplish? The goals, overarching goals, are for you to see what the House 2 budget proposal is, our budget again, and our priorities. Mr. Furtado will begin with the first slide with the Massachusetts funding proposal.
Sure. So, as you know, the governor's budget was announced in January. That's kind of all we have at the moment. It was actually a pretty startling announcement. Communities, primarily cities, that have very diverse student populations, saw significant gains in state funding, both, overall through the formula and specifically in Chapter 70. So we are one of those communities, and saw some numbers that, in my experience, haven't seen before. So we were pretty happy about that. Part of that was the governor made a full commitment to the Student Opportunity Act and implemented the entire thing. It was supposed to be phased in over 7 years. Part of that was our enrollment numbers, which have bounced back somewhat from the pandemic levels that we were actually penalized for in the current fiscal year. Part of that was because the state had made a decision to provide funding for districts that were providing career pathways for students, which we have a very big push for through CTE, as well as early college. So all of these kind of factors went into the formula and resulted in a very good outcome for Attleboro. So state chapter 70 funding, current year was 41 million, next year 47 million, an increase of 6.2 million. The local contribution requirement for the city went from 39 million to 41 million, an increase of 2.2 million. So I want to make the point that the city's contribution did go up, and that's pretty significant. But most, over two-thirds of the money came from the state Chapter 70 grant to the district. So this is just a breakdown of both Chapter 70 increases and the local contribution increase. So our proposal, once getting these funds, understanding the city's commitment to funding above net school spending, which for 23 is pegged at about $89.5 million, we requested a budget of, or proposing a budget of $90.5 million.
Mr. Furtado, can I ask a question?
Absolutely, yeah, please do.
It has to do with the commitment above net school spending
Yep.
number, because I'm always a little bit confused on where that number comes from. Because I think I was on the school committee when we were at net school spending, and we've worked hard to get that number up. We started with the meals tax, and then the annual amount over that Mayor Dumas committed in the disastrous year with all the layoffs, and the commitments of Mayor. What is that made up of, the 1.2? Because I
Sure.
thought it was more than that.
It is. It ranges from 2 to 2.5, depending on the circumstance overall in the city budget, I believe. For 23, our proposal would include a number of about 2.2 million above net school spending. Again, there are a lot of credits that will be taken, and we factored that into the final number, and that's how we landed at 90.5. So it would put the district at about $1 million above net school spending, but it would require from that committed funds about 2.2 million to get there.
Okay. Mr. Storrs?
Related. So I guess I'm just a little confused.
Yep.
If you're saying that the commitment above net school spending is 2.2 million, why wouldn't that 1.2 there be 2.2?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and this is all the kind of magic of educational funding in the state of Massachusetts. There's a whole component, and it has to do with what the city does in terms of managing the healthcare system that we're a part of. Printing our paychecks, doing the auditing of our warrants. They are allowed to take credit for support to the schools. That's all sort of city functions that support the schools directly. That offsets other components of net school spending and results in our net school spending value going down every year, because those credits grow every year. Not by what they do, but by the allowance set by the state. So, and I spoke about this a long time ago, where it was obvious to me that the trend was very bad for the schools. Long term, it wasn't going to happen in any one year, but over 10, 15, 20 years, that credit was going to significantly affect our ability to fund the schools
So that's that $1 million that's missing from that number.
Mr. Geddes?
So just, I had another question, but so
Sure.
for clarification, that 1.2 is actually a net school spending money as opposed to a gross net school?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly, yes.
My other question was, you mentioned the governor went ahead and funded the full Student Opportunity Act rather than phasing it all in. So this exceptional boon that we can be somewhat excited about, this is a one-time boon, and there's no reason to expect that we're going to get, in other words, he's just kind of resetting the baseline
Correct.
going forward rather than.
It's not going to keep growing.
Okay, so, but we should also expect that it's not going to decrease, and that commitment isn't going to decrease at any point in the future, right?
Unfortunately, I have been part of state budgets where Chapter 70 was decreased, but we should not have that expectation. So, I mean,
Thank you.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. So back to the credits that we were just discussing. Is it common for cities and towns for the administrative purposes to take the credits, so effectively take the funding from the school district? Is that like
Yeah.
a common practice?
yes, yeah.
All districts pretty much do that?
I don't know about all, I don't know what percentage do it, but I know it's, yes, it's, if you let a municipality know they can make money doing this, they will do it.
Mr. Larson?
I think we're just getting, I think, one slide ahead of ourselves, because on the next slide, I think you're going to see
Yeah,
that the increase year over year of those credits is only about $130,000. Not to minimize $130,000, but,
right.
I mean, this past year, they took almost $1.1 million in credits, and the next year coming forward, it's about just under 1.2, so it's not, depending on your point of view, it's a significant change. In the scope of our budget, it's not a significant change.
Right.
But I guess my question on this slide is, why is the city's funding above net school spending going down?
Because the credits are going up.
Because the credits typically are going up, yes.
But, I mean, the funding above net school spending is going down by $320,000, and the credits are $130,000. You know, that's an, you know,
Sorry,
again.
say that again?
So if you look at the credits, city credit against required local contribution has gone from it went down.
It went down, yeah, by about $100,000.
The credits
Yeah.
went down, and the funding above net school spending went down.
Yes.
So that's my question, is why is the funding above net school spending going down? I had always heard that we were, you know, the city was going to do more, you know, continue to do more for the schools.
Yeah, and as I said, that number has fluctuated between $2 and $2.5 million. It started out, as you said, back in 13. It was the addition of, I want to say, I wasn't here, but it was $1 million in
Meals tax.
meals
Yeah.
tax. That was added to because of the crisis.
Yep.
And that went up to, I think, I want to say 1.6 or 1.7.
It was 1.8, I think, because we did an $800,000
Yeah.
agreement. Wasn't that Mr. Sawyer, do you remember?
I do.
Yeah, I think it was 1.8, and then there were a couple other things.
And then since then, under the current administration, they have sort of become less opaque and dealt very directly and transparently about unexpected tax revenues and growth not anticipated in the budget. And so we have gotten those dollars. So those have come in at, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, please, finish your point.
Have come in to about, so, you know, again, depending on the year, depending on the budget situation, $2 to $2.5 million for the schools.
To answer the chairman's question more directly, I think the city's facing a slightly more challenging condition than the schools are.
Okay.
And there was hope.
23.
In 23.
Yeah.
And there was hope and talk of an actual increase over the 2.5 last year. Back in, I forget when we had that first conversation, there was still optimism about that. But
Yep.
as they got deeper into their budget process and realized some of the challenges that they were facing, they informed us that in light of our situation, that this was the number that they were coming in at. And considering that, you know, if they wanted to, they could have balanced more of the problem on us, that it seemed all pretty reasonable, to me at least. But
Okay.
that's the answer to the question.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's all.
Yeah, so, yeah, that was about a $300,000 reduction on that side. So I think a key takeaway is that the school's budget, despite the increases that we are going to enjoy for '23, are closer to net school spending levels than this year. That's one takeaway. The other takeaway, again, that I think is pretty important, is most of the benefit we're going to enjoy in '23 came from the state Chapter 70 funding, not from additional burden on the city. I provided the committee with comparative numbers for the last 5 years, so you can see how things have moved and changed. But you can see, from a high in fiscal year '21, a decrease in our a distance above net school spending levels.
So what do we value most in terms of our priorities for the budget? Our district learning priorities haven't changed. We continue to want to provide experiences that have value beyond the classroom. We want to be able to continue to use technology as the powerful tool that it is to integrate learning and create innovation for our students. And with that innovation, we want to be able to personalize their learning programs that we provide, and then also give them opportunities outside of the classroom for service learning and experiential learning. All of this is then built upon our Portrait of a Graduate, where we want our students to be able to communicate, collaborate, innovate, and be healthy and well-balanced. So in terms of our goals in making decisions, we wanted to continue to address the gaps that have been created due to the interrupted learning from COVID. And with that interrupted learning, there is a need to continue to support our inclusive practices for all of our students, including additional support staff for our students with disabilities and our English learners. And then also, as we transition into the new high school, we need to be prepared to absorb some of the costs that'll be associated with that. So, as you've heard us say all along, our main priority continues to be staffing and absorbing the costs that we've been able to provide through the use of some of our ESSER funds. And these priorities also align with the evidence-based practices that we spoke about last week with the Student Opportunity Act. The Student Opportunity Act plan that we just had to submit to DESE. And so that includes the paraprofessionals that we continue to provide for our students in K-2 who provide interventions to our students, the additional support staff that we have for inclusive practices, providing our students with the supports they need emotionally and behaviorally so that they can access the curriculum and focus on their learning. Supporting the new CTE programs with the staff and the supplies that are needed, and then continuing to build our early college program so that students can earn college credit while they're here with us. We can support them through those growing pains and learning how to manage college expectations versus high school, and creating a clear path for them for post-secondary education. So what does this all mean? I think everyone knows our top priority for the past several years continues to be staffing and absorbing the costs that have been associated with COVID and the ESSER funds that have been provided to us, and taking on those costs. So what are our next steps? We'll have the release of the House proposal, the release of the final budget. Our public hearing is scheduled for the next meeting, April 25th. Your approval, and then the mayor's submission to the municipal council. Any questions?
Mr. Frappier?
Thanks. A little new to the process. The first two items, release of House proposal and release of final budget, we have no control over that. So it's possible our public hearing might happen before those two items happen. Is that fair?
Likely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Geis?
Thank you. So a couple of questions. Knowing that we just got this today, I'm sure that in 2 weeks I'll have much more in-depth questions, but just in quickly looking, I am excited for the administration's commitment to adding staff. Mr. Sawyer and Mr. Withers both talked about the 2016 cuts, and we're still just a year or two away from having recovered from all of those cuts. And I think that lends to your point earlier, Mr. Sawyer, that despite all of those growths and additional positions and some that have been made, we're still facing the same gap that we were 6 years ago financially. I think that's very telling. One of the big increases that I did notice and looked into a little bit today was related to special education, because I saw that we do have a significant increase in staffing for special education next year, but there's also a couple of significant increases for private programs and out-of-district placements. Where are we at with assessing those programs? Are those opportunities that are those primarily residential situations that we cannot accommodate here in the district, or are there situations where we could be providing programming to keep more of those students in district?
Relative to what you see on the proposed budget for 23, that was a series of students, actually 3 or 4. One of them was residential, and the remainder were pretty substantial. Not something we could consider to do in the district. So it was a a pretty big hit. It's as Yvonne described it, these just kind of move-in conditions where in the late winter, early spring, we just got hit by those circumstances.
And there's always fluctuation and changes.
Yeah,
in
to
there.
add to that, I mean, it's you see it in both our staff and out of district, because as much as possible, we want to keep all of our students in-house, and there are increases in programs because of some of the move-ins. We can meet their needs, but that's, created the need for more staff so that we can keep all of our programs, at the correct staffing levels. But some of the move-ins have needs that we can't meet.
Thank you.
Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think some might see, 6.7 million, whatever it is, increase from a previous year and go, oh, wow, we have all this money to spare kind of thing. And I want to give a second to alleviate that type of thinking. My understanding is costs are going up. We're looking to fill some of those positions that we haven't been able to fill, so on and so on.
Well,
and all of a sudden, that 7 million.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to start with the fact that, as I said in my Friday update, we only survived this year by engaging in some fiscal practices that under normal circumstances we wouldn't have done, right? And so the bill on that comes due, and
July 1.
we've known this, and we've alluded to it in on several meetings. If we hadn't had an increase of this magnitude, we would have been facing down a pretty significant problem. So, not all, but most of this money that looks like a big, juicy number is really the money that pays for what we should have got last year, didn't get, and spent anyways.
And to couple with that, because I know we always talk about this number, and it's very surprising to people. Of our $90+ million budget, what's the percentage of flexible, I guess that's always the term.
Discretionary funding.
Discretionary funding, please.
About 2.7% of that number.
Okay.
It's,
I think
it's
that's
a very
always important to
small
put that in, and that's for 23, right?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
So, I guess I would just say, I'm happy that the governor's budget is funding the Student Opportunity Act, and, he's making up for what happened last year. But the reduction in the amount over net school spending on the city side makes me nervous. I think we saw in the past, the school department, relied on, big years from the state, and when all of a sudden that dried up, for a couple years in a row, we saw ourselves in a crisis, and we've been floating on the edge of a crisis ever since. And, now that the state has come through with a good year, cutting it back like the city has done makes me nervous because, what are we going to do in 2 years when that number from the state is 0? So, I don't like to, be the bearer of bad news or, Mr. Gloom or anything, but I wish that wasn't part of this.
It's an important observation, and I would say that the reduction in the credit was driven entirely by the state doubling the reimbursement for charter school tuitions.
Mhm.
That was almost $500,000. So that's also not going to keep happening. So
Okay.
that trend on the credit growing will come back after they digest that benefit from the state for 23, and should be a concern.
And I should add that we've had conversations with City Hall about the fact that from our perspective, we need to look at the credits and talk about not what's possible for them to take, but what's a more, accurate assessment of what's fair. It's good, like so many things, it's going to take some time to work through all of that, but we've put that on their radar as a thing that we want to talk through, and that I think would help with this as well.
Ms. Larson?
I think, one other thing that we kind of all need to just kind of keep in the back of our mind is the FY22 budget was incomplete when we started the year, and was basically backfilled almost approximately $2 million.
$1.2 million.
$1.2 million after free cash was certified in the fall. So we started in a bit of a hole to start with. And I guess personally, I'm encouraged that we're starting FY23 fully funded with repetitive and reoccurring funds versus last year starting with most of our budget and then using one-time funds to backfill. So I mean, I certainly understand my colleagues' concerns about where's the other million, but I guess I'm looking at it more from all right, we filled in the $2 million, the $1.5 million hole that we started this year with, and we're back to the $1 billion, 1.2 of real solid money.
Right.
To build forward with.
Yeah, that total increase had to fill that structural deficit first thing.
Right, because I mean, I know you and I have talked a number of times about, going forward, we have this little pothole that we need to fill before we can start attacking Mr. Sawyer's things that we need to work on also.
And about
well, not your
$750,000 in operating at the new high school.
Right, but I mean, it just, when you're starting from a hole underneath the budget, just solidifying that and then moving forward from there, I think is just an important reminder to people going forward, so.
Yep.
Mr. Geddes?
Sorry, Mr. Furtado, you just mentioned the increase in operating costs with the new building, because I saw some of those, I was guessing are some of, I guessed that those are what led to some of the increases in like IT and facilities and things like that. How conservative or aggressive are those estimates? In other words, is it, are we confident that we're, for the first year of the building, we're going to land it right at those numbers, or is there very much a likelihood that we may actually save in some areas more than we're expecting to? Or
yeah, so if we land right out of the funding, that deserve a really big raise, but no, it's speculative, because I spoke directly with 4 districts that built new high schools and just asked in terms of operating, especially utilities, what their experience was, and it was pretty dramatic. And I know that in Somerset it was also pretty dramatic. So in addition to that, Skanska also did some surveying and got we pegged the increases based on those results, and we'll see how it goes.
Thank you.
All right. So we have the public hearing in 2 weeks.
We do.
Great. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Furtado.
Who's my report?
All right. Next on our business agenda, school choice. We had a public hearing earlier tonight. The interdistrict school law requires all school districts to accept incoming school choice students unless the school committee votes not to participate or votes to limit the number of incoming students in a particular grades. It's my understanding that it's the administration's recommendation that we not participate in school choice for the 2022-2023 year. All right. And I'll entertain a motion that the Attleboro School Committee not participate in school choice for 2022 to 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, comments? Mr. Geddes?
So just to be clear, based on the wording of the motion, a yes vote is in support of the administration's recommendation to not go into.
Correct. A yes vote means no.
That's why I wanted to ask.
Mr. Frappier?
When's the last time we engaged in this program in the affirmative?
We did it a couple years ago.
3 years ago?
Yeah, we did it in 2019.
Are those students still in the system to ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
But there are not many.
Okay.
But,
But there are 2 of them.
oh no,
Um,
but why did we revert?
We reverted back just due to the amount of money that we receive for students that come in as school choice.
Okay.
And knowing all the programming that we have available for CTE, that would have been a decrease in the amount that we would receive per student.
Okay. Thank you.
And just as an addition to that update, we are now currently working on setting up the programs so that we could tuition in CTE students from neighboring communities at the full rate rather than the reduced rate that we would have under school choice. So we are still pursuing what the end goal originally was, but just we're going to get there the right way.
Thank you.
Mr. Geddes?
But, thank you, but that would only be on a space available basis after Attleboro students have been placed in the program.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right, so the motion is to opt out of school choice. So again, all those in favor, meaning all those who want to opt out of school choice, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next, minutes from our March 28th, 2022 meeting. Minutes were circulated with your materials. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or edits? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have our consent agenda tonight for items. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,500 from the Feinstein Foundation to Wamsutta Middle School to be deposited in the gifts donation line. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $5,000 from the Feinstein Foundation to the Hill Roberts School to be deposited in the gifts donation line. Motion to approve a donation in the amount of $204.84 from Bliss Brothers to the Attleboro High School class of 2024. And motion to approve an overnight international field trip proposal for 128th grade middle school students to travel to Washington, D.C. on May 24th to 27th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those, Mr. Storrs?
Just want to say, glad to see the Washington trip back. Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motions pass. Next, we'll do our subcommittee meetings report. We have one, Finance and Budget. Mr. Larson?
Thank you. Finance and Budget Subcommittee met Wednesday, April 6th. Mr. Furtado took us through the monthly budget reports. The budget is performing well at this point. There's some concerns that we've been talking about all year with transportation between McKinney-Vento and special ed. We believe we have a funding source for some of the special ed transportation funding, but the McKinney-Vento is still going to be over budget, and I know Mr. Furtado and City Hall have been in conversations with that, and we'll come up with a plan. We had a brief MSBA update. A number of the issues that we talked about, the superintendent also included in the Friday update that he sent us. Talked about the auditorium seating at the building next door. Talked about the floors at the elementary schools. They seem to be under control, but they have created a little bit of a hiccup. We had planned to bring forward a procedural manual for the management of grants, but we're going to hold that up for another meeting. We reviewed the FY23 budget. We reviewed the RFP going out for transportation contract because that expires at the end of this school year. We reviewed the RFP for the food service contract because that again also expires at the end of this year. So those two contracts should be on the street if they're not already.
They're out.
They're out, okay. We have two motions to bring forward. One is housekeeping for approving prior year invoices, and the other was, it was brought to our attention that in the last 8 or 9 years, we have not visited the stipend that different staff members receive for coming and participating and taking the official notes of our committee meetings and our subcommittee meetings. We had a discussion about what that looked like. We're going to bring forward a number, and I'll explain when we get to that point how we got to it. So the first of the two motions is entertain a motion to pay prior year invoices and send to the municipal council for approval in the amount of $11,858.75. I believe everyone was given backup information to those, to that breakdown.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Second one is we're bringing forward a motion to approve the increase of the stipend for the recording secretary for the school committee, subcommittee meetings, and special meetings from $120 a meeting to $150 a meeting, beginning July 1st, 2023.
22.
22, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Second.
So again, I believe we went back and checked. This number has not really been addressed in the last 8 years. So if we figured a 2 to 2.5% increase over those 8 years, we got within the ballpark of 150 to pick a round number. And that's about the extent of how much hard work we stuck into it, but we wanted to come forward with a number that we could actually defend to you all if you had the desire to question us on it. Any comments? Sure.
Thank you. So has it been 8 years or has it been longer?
That was 10. I think
It
that
was 10. Okay, not 15.
not 15.
Okay.
I wanted to do 500, but they shot me. Mr. Storrs.
You with this?
So, seeing the vote that came out of the subcommittee, were there any concerns or negative points that was discussed?
No, the one dissenting vote, and I'm not going to disclose who that
gonna
was,
go into that
thought the number should be higher.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't me.
But you just said you wanted to.
I know. That's how I started the conversation off.
Shouldn't it have been a
So let's go to
2-2?
500. and
Shouldn't
then-
that have been a 2-2?
Seems like a no-brainer to me.
Aye.
Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns?
Just
yes.
for overall budget impact, since that was the start of the meeting.
This much.
Yeah, talking $30 over maybe 40, 50 meetings across all subcommittee, special, and full committee meetings, give or take.
Maybe.
That's a rounding error, right?
Yeah, it's
On the subcommittee.
I didn't write it down. It wasn't big enough. Sorry.
No worries.
Any other concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's the extent of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Next, we have open forum. Was there anyone here who would like to address the committee at open forum? All right, I will close open forum. And next, the Attleboro School Committee will convene an executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2 and 3, to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with non-union personnel, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school committee. The committee will not return to open session. Have a motion?
So moved.
Ms. Bordeaux? Yes. Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Frappier?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
All right, we'll take 3 minutes.
Hold on.